Hi, everyone. On behalf of HR.com, welcome to this webcast, Skills, Empowering Employees to Walk Their Career Journey. It's sponsored by GoOne. This webcast has been pre-approved for one HRCI credit, may also be submitted for SHRM credit, so please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credit. You'll receive an email from HR.com within 2 business days, which will include your certification information. During this webcast, if you have any questions or comments or need to reach out to us for any reason at all, please use the Q&A in your webinar controls. All right, and without further ado, I'm absolutely pleased to turn it over to Leah Shiro to get us started.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And good morning to those of you joining us from the West Coast. Good afternoon of those of you joining us from the East. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Leah Shiro, a talent product leader here at ADP. Welcome everyone to today's session. So hey, before we get started, here's a few notes about today's presentation. Today's presentation is not legal or tax advice. Before taking any actions on the information contained in this presentation, employers should review this material with their counsel. Keep in mind that what we're discussing today is not the final word on any of these topics. Also, nothing's intended to be a political opinion. ADP has over 600,000 clients, and our role is to assist employers with their human capital management needs and their compliance responsibilities. Just remember, any questions that come in, we'll be happy to answer at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Please join me in welcoming our today's speakers. So first, join me in welcoming Barnaby Dorfman, Chief Technology Officer at GoOne, an established leader in online learning and education, and ADP's content provider for Essential Learning, our new learning management system. Barnaby is an internet entrepreneur, executive CEO, CTO, and CPO, with decades of experience managing technology teams who build applications that have been used by hundreds of millions of people and generated billions of dollars in revenues. Previous to GoOne, Barnaby has applications that have been used by hundreds and millions of people and generated billions in revenue. Previous to GoOne, Barnaby was an executive at PayScale.com for more than 8 years, leading product engineering, IT, data science, and analyst teams through major growth. Thought it was worth repeating twice. Next, let me introduce you to Amy Leschke-Carl as Vice President of Performance Acceleration at the Marcus Buckingham Company. Amy collaborates with clients to transform engagement and performance across the globe. Amy uses her firsthand experience to customize her approach to the unique culture of each company. Before coming to the Marcus Buckingham Company, Amy led learning and development, HR technology, and HR analytics for several Fortune 500 companies. Finally, let me introduce you to today's moderator and my great friend, Doug Plord. Doug Plord is Director of Sales Learning Delivery for the Major Accounts Human Resource Outsourcing and Retirement Services divisions. He's the leader of the sales learning coaches for each of these divisions and brings a great ability to connect for the field for relevant feedback to incorporate learning programs. With over 15 years of experience in the human capital management industry, Doug provides a seasoned and unique perspective of businesses and sales to the next generation of ADP super sellers. So without further ado, it's over to you, Doug.
I appreciate it, Leah. And very much, let's all welcome Leah, our new area product leader for talent. Wonderful introduction. I always get confused by Barnaby's as well, too. There's a lot of math involved with Barnaby's. There's millions, there's billions, and it can get confusing, but awesome job, Leah. Thank you so much. Don't go too far. We're going to bring you back in at the end today to talk a little bit more about what we can do for those people out there. Thank you to HR.com. And Rhonda, thank you very much for a wonderful platform today. I am incredibly excited to get a chance to speak to my good friend, Amy Leschke-Carl, and of course, Barnaby Dorfman. But before we get to that, I don't know if you all know this saying, but the saying goes, you should always start a webinar with a poll. Maybe I made it up. I don't know, but I've heard that saying before. So let's start with a poll. So right there, out there now, just do me a favor, just check which box, right? Like, what is the biggest talent development challenge that you are facing? Like, I'm going to look at these. I'm thinking, upskilling and reskilling, offering development, process and infrastructure, senior support for learning strategy. it's a toss up. Leah, you've been working on these things for a long time now. You're probably got your answers. Barnaby, Amy, you've got your answers. Love polls to start out, get us all engaged, get everybody fired up about talking about skills and talent. All right, Rhonda, let's see what we got for poll results here. Let's push those poll results out. Let's see. All right, so a good deal of you, 41, so 43%, upskilling and reskilling existing employees. And right behind it is process and infrastructure to create that development program, offering development opportunities coming in third, and then senior support. So it says underneath it, I don't know if you saw it, I did not answer that question. I did not, because I didn't know which way to go. But Amy, I'm going to start with you. When we start thinking about what skills really means, and we start talking about the concept and the process of skills-based talent strategy, I wonder if you could just do me a favor, Amy, and just define the skills-based talent strategy. What does it really mean? And what are they looking at currently as what they should be putting in place from a strategy standpoint? And hello to you, as always.
Hi, Doug. Good morning. Good afternoon. I think it's a great question. And the answer is, gosh, it means so many different things, right? When we read the headlines, we're reading the business articles, so much talk and chatter around skills, as there should be. But I would recommend that we all take a little bit of a half a step back and go, what do we mean by skills? Do we mean skills that we can see? Do we mean completing a checklist? Do we mean unique kind of things like collaboration and how we show up and presentation skills, all those sorts of things? So I think thinking about for our own organizations and our own L&D teams particularly, what does that actually mean? What do we mean by a skill? And that's going to vary by organization. And so when we take that, once we define it and turn it into a strategy or incorporate it into our strategies, again, I think we need to be a little bit careful and not, I'm going to say, over lean into skills as a thing, but recognize how important that they are and how ever fluid and ever changing. So one of the things as we think about our talent strategies, whether they're skill-based, whether you include that in the title or not, is how do we meet the needs of the workforce today? How do we meet the needs of our employees today? And big giant and how do we prepare them for the future, and the future that we can't quite put our finger on? We don't know, right? We don't know what skills are going to be needed 5 years from now. We don't know what skills probably, quite frankly, are going to be needed maybe even a year from now. So it's, yes, those tacit skills, those explicit skills, and it's the ability to help our team members, to help our employees learn in the moment and grow in the ways that they need to, that we don't quite exactly know what they are yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that not to lean too far on that word skill. And Barnaby, you and I have actually talked about that in the past as well, too. Like, so when you're thinking about skills and what companies should be starting to think about with how to incorporate that skills-based talent strategy, what are you seeing from your perspective in Go One?
Yeah, well, I think taking a really comprehensive view, and I think to Amy's point, there's so many dimensions to it. But you mentioned I like numbers, so I thought I'd share a couple of quick numbers. The March labor report came out, and there are about 5 million people who are unemployed, meaning they're looking for work, but there are also over 11 million open positions. So there are more than 2 jobs available for every person who's looking. And I think there are a couple of ramifications to that. One is, we think about the fact that pretty much for every one of those job openings, there's probably an employee or a group of employees who are covering that work and taking care of whatever is needed. And so the whole idea that, skills are just these hard skills that we used to have, I think doesn't really work, especially with all of this change in the labor force. And continuing with that, the other thing that I noticed is in the last 10 months, 4 million people have changed jobs or left a job each month. So over 40 million people have changed jobs in the last 10 months. And you just think about the amount of change that represents and anxiety. Now, the next thing I would share just some of the research I've been doing is more and more surveys and more articles coming out saying rebranding the Great Resignation as the Great Regret. And many employees are regretting those changes. Well, where does that regret come from? I think it comes a lot of times from uncertainty, discomfort with not knowing how things work where you are. And I think that the solution for so much of what's challenging and difficult in life is learning. And kind of going from there, I would say if we think about how corporate learning used to be kind of a privilege, like there were kind of two buckets, I think. There was what everybody had to do maybe fire safety training or cybersecurity training. And then there was training that was reserved for people who were showing a lot of promise or who were up and comers. And that's because the supply was limited, right? It was limited to the number of seats that could fit in a classroom with an instructor. Now, with e-learning and online learning, supply is not limited. And on the one hand, and then on the other hand, we have all this turmoil and all this change that people are struggling with. So what I think it translates to is really meeting individuals where they are and with the kinds of content that they need and in the ways of learning that they need, whether it be audible or visual or 10 minutes a day or going deep for a bunch of hours. And I kind of like to think of it a bit as a bit of a pyramid of the basics that you need. Again, the stuff for compliance. Then there are the skills, more hard skills. We see this a lot. We see a huge growth in things like, how do I be a better writer? How do I master Excel, especially with all the growth in data in general? And then also kind of in the, how do I be happy? How do I show up in a positive way at work? So we have meditation and yoga classes, how to be mindful at work kinds of classes. And we're seeing growth, frankly, across all of those categories.
I am a big believer in the yoga classes, especially Barnaby, working on some core, right? Like need that strength when I'm sitting on my chair here all day. Amy, when you start thinking about like when companies are starting to kind of think about how am I going to put some sort of platform, some sort of, process in place, I would imagine they kind of have to start off with, well, what skill gaps do we have? And I'm curious, like from your perspective, Amy, like how do companies get a good feel for what skills gaps they might have?
Well, a great way to do that, Doug, if they do have a learning management system and they do have a good content library, is to actually look at what people are seeking, what they're wanting to learn about. It's difficult, especially in the, I'm going to say kind of soft skill area and those things that are much more difficult to put our finger on. It's actually kind of hard to know. I mean, you kind of know, like you kind of intuitively know based on the people that you're interacting with every day, but it's hard to know kind of holistically. Right. The other thing I would say around that is, again, kind of what we talked about earlier, is we have to be a little bit careful not to over articulate on the models. So I'll give you a good example of that. Collaboration, right? Everybody should be collaborative. Really? I don't think so. I don't think everybody actually needs to be collaborative. So oftentimes in organizations, because we want to answer the question that you just asked, we create these models that no one actually fits into, or we create a path, right? We love to do learning paths and career paths, and those are great. And we also probably need to recognize that that is not a one size fits all thing. It's really, how do we help create a one size fits one opportunity for employees to learn and to grow? Because no one fits in that one ideal model.
Right. And I want to go back to the word collaboration. Why is that a tilt of the head sort of situation? I know why. For me, sometimes it's the too many cooks in the kitchen kind of theory of, if I collaborate with 100 people, I might get 100 ideas on how to attack something. Is that where you're coming from, Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. And some people do their own unique best work in an environment that's not super collaborative.
Sure.
And I think that's it's kind of like we've kind of, absorbed or grabbed onto that headline or the book, which, by the way, those are awesome. They give us curiosity. They open the door. We should be paying attention to this. And we also need to, I'm going to say, almost like have the courage to be able to go, oh, yes, some employees are collaborative, some aren't. Some are really good at presenting, others aren't. That doesn't mean they don't have value in the organization. And it also doesn't mean that we need to, and this is where the models kind of fall short, is not everybody needs to be great at it.
Right.
And because when we do that, then we kind of get into that endless loop of, well, you're not good at it. You should go learn something. I'm never going to really learn it. And it doesn't matter how many hours of learning I might go to. Some folks may not ever be a great, I'm going to say, collaborator. That doesn't mean they're not valuable contributing employees. That means for us as leaders inside of the organization, particularly learning and talent leaders, our job is then to find the spots where those people can contribute most. So if we tie that back to learning and content and L&D, we need to create the space and flexibility for people to, yes, give them maybe some guidance on paths to take, but also we need to give them the space to be able to create their own paths.
Absolutely. Barnaby, I see you nodding along. I'm sure you've kind of subscribed to that same theory that, that sometimes we as humans, right, we're unique. and each of us have different skills. So I'm wondering if you're along the same lines, that what can we do uniquely as humans in this, world that we're living in right now?
Absolutely. Again, a lot of L&D traditionally was prescriptive, and kind of came up with a formulaic approach, as Amy said. The opportunity now is to allow employees, there'll still be the requirements, the things that have to be done, but there's also the opportunity to open up large libraries of learning to individuals and let them find their own path and explore. And then some of the work that we're doing is also figuring out how to help people with the discovery process, because a lot of times people think that whether it's e-commerce or streaming video, for entertainment at home, it's like people know what they want. You just got to make it easy for them to find it. The truth is, they have a direction. They have an experience base that they're looking to build on or have reflected in their ongoing learning. And so, helping people connect the dots and say, if you like this, you probably like that, in similar ways, is technology that we're working on to really facilitate that journey of exploration and learning that goes beyond the prescriptive.
So I'm going to have you guys take a little bit of a water break, Barnaby and Amy, because I'm really, really excited about something. We actually have a client that has joined us, and I'm incredibly excited to talk to her. Michelle Perry is the director of HR for American Assets Trust. And she has gracefully and graciously given us her time today to talk a little bit about what her journey has been in this world as well, too. Michelle, thank you so very much for being here. And can you just, before we get started, give us a little bit of background about American Assets Trust and what is it that you all do out there in San Diego? Oh, Michelle, you're on mute, just so you're aware. There we go.
Hi, American Assets Trust is a REIT. A REIT is a real estate investment trust. So we own properties that are commercial, residential, retail. We're all over the place. So we needed some unique ways to reach out to our customers because we're in different states as well. So American Assets Trust has been in business over 50 years and leading the way in the industry as far as all of our assets are owned by us. Most REITs are managing properties owned by other people.
Got it.
We consider ourselves the best in class REIT. So we want to actually have services for our employees that reflect that.
Okay. So before you brought on the learning path that we at ADP have provided for you with our program, tell me a little bit about the challenges that you were facing at the organization that our essential learning has helped you with.
Prior to coming on to ADP, it was very difficult for us to do training virtually, do training at the same time for most of our staff. We have a lot of required training. We are very safety oriented, so we do safety trainings every week. So sending emails with the attachments and all that was bogging up everyone's email system, and we couldn't tell who was taking the class or not. During the training or not. So with our growth, we have a lot of talent that is new to the company. So we have to get them up and running because we just acquired several properties. But the way ADP has set up the training library, we are able to add our training, use their training, do a combination of both. And we're not sending out an email with a bunch of attachments. They can go in the ADP system. They can pull down the training. We put it on their modules, their personal modules for them. So we can see when they took the training. We can see if they passed the training. We can see everything. It has made the process seemingly smooth and saved us so much time. I can't even tell you how much time we've saved and how happy the employees are not to have their email system bogged up with attachments.
I can imagine.
So that's the main thing. I mean,
I can imagine.
And
Michelle, I know
many,
that. Yeah, go ahead.
with so many cybersecurity issues and most won't even open the attachment. I didn't know if it was really from you. I didn't know. So you had another email. Yes, this is from us. We don't have to do any of that anymore. We don't have to worry about sending an attachment that people believe are attached with some type of fraudulent activity. So they have made it safe and secure and have made the process very, 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 very easy.
So if I'm not mistaken, one of the things that I know that you really like about it is not just that it's, saving you time, but it's also building confidence in not only yourself, but also all of the employees that they're doing the right things. And if I'm not mistaken, Michelle, you have employees that are on site with you in an office, but then also like spread out all around the country at on site at properties. So like, I have to imagine that you have to take a
Yes.
deep breath of relief that you can track all of this. And the employees have to feel pretty good about that as well, too.
Yes, and they can take the training on their phone now. They couldn't do that before. So this is just a wonderful avenue to get information out in an easy way, and our employees are ecstatic about it.
So if somebody was to ask you, like, what would be like the top two things about the learning path and the learning program with ADP that you've gained, what are the top two things that you would say to them as far as recommending it?
It's user friendly, it's easy, it's accessible by all of our employees, and we didn't have that before. Accessibility and ease of use.
Ease of use and the ability to get it from anywhere they are. I love that. Michelle, thank you so very, very much for coming on today. I appreciate it very, very much. It's been a really cool time to be able to spend some time with you and learn a little bit more about how you are using our program. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Amy, when you hear this and you hear stories like this, and I'm sure you hear stories about this all the time, like tell me a little bit about what you're hearing and what excites you most about what Michelle was just talking about.
Well, she hit on all the really the key points that organizations are looking for and that they have to have, quite frankly, to be able to function efficiently and effectively in the world of talent. And that is accessibility. And Michelle, you had great kind of stories about what so many of us have experienced around super full inboxes and attachments and what do I pay attention to, and I can't find things. If you do tell me I need to do them, right, it gets very messy and very I don't know, it gets very noisy for employees. So definitely accessibility. How do we make learning content, whether it's compliance and skill-based or whether it's kind of career-y, leadership-y, if you will, whether those things, either one of those, they have to be accessible. It also has to be consumable. So one of my, and I'm so good at this as an L&D practitioner and professional, was making really complicated compliance training, right? It's like, oh, I don't like compliance training. So let's make it, we'll add videos and we'll make it longer. And actually that's counterproductive. So having learning content that is consumable, especially when it comes to skills and compliance. So consumable, focusing on the critical few things that we need our employees to do. And then the third thing, and again, Michelle, you talked about it, was relevancy, right? It's got to be relevant to either the world of work that I am in today or the world of work that I'm trying to create for myself.
So Barnaby, when you hear all of this, like, you've been in the world of LMS for a very long time. Like, what should people start thinking about when they're thinking, how do I pair the technology and empower my employees' learning with that skill building journey that we want to craft out for them?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to listening. Amy talked about doing very long, complicated courses, and I think that has been sort of the state of the art for quite a while. But it's really listening, polling, however, marrying up your employee engagement surveys or ways that you take the pulse of how employees are doing with opportunities for learning and development, I think is a really good approach. And just generally being data driven. So, a platform like ADP, which provides a lot of data around what employees are doing, just in general, obviously, but in particular in the learning and development area, whether it's other products that we had, there's increasingly reporting available also, especially as learning and development libraries come together kind of in a single LMS, LXP type solution where I know kind of in the past, when I was managing IT, I also had to deal with many, many different providers and provisioning them and bringing them on board and figuring out who was supposed to have access to which one. And having more of a kind of one-stop shop really helps with looking at it holistically and being able to kind of see patterns and dig into the data. And then, if you marry that up with other things that you do within HR, like job functions and career laddering, and kind of what I haven't seen a lot sort of broadly is where you'll see kind of, if we think about kind of like job families or job function and laddering, kind of what are the things you're expected to do and what are some of the skills, but maybe another column where these are the things that the kinds of learning you should complete, or and then the others is, I guess, two other things come to mind. One is just skills in general is a really hot topic. A lot of people talk about how we need to be better at that a college degree or some sort of certificate from a vocational school just isn't enough. Things are constantly changing, and so how you actually think about and document skills is something I think worthy of investing in. We're investing in that in Go1 and doing some active research and trying to figure out relationships between job role titles, skills, and learning. And it's a big opportunity. The last thing that sort of popped into my mind is just the rate of innovation and new things being leveraged in technology in this space is really exciting. Michelle mentioned mobile. That's, again, meeting people where they are, and what's possible on a mobile device is really quite stunning. And if we think about how, again, much of e-learning was limited to office workers, but there's so many people who are out in the field, or who, and again, with remote work, never come into the office. And so being able to leverage technologies like that. One of the things that I'm personally excited about is we recently announced a partnership with a company called Tailspin, which is a virtual reality soft skills learning platform. And they have basically a manager, for example, can go into a virtual work environment and have a difficult conversation with an employee who potentially needs to, address some behaviors. They have a real focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, giving people the opportunity to learn and experiment in that in a safe environment. So those are some things that I'm excited about and things I think people can think about.
I wanted to circle back, Amy, to something Barnaby mentioned earlier. We have, last year, record amount of people resigning their job, moving to a different job. Actually, some people leaving the workforce to go start their own businesses, people retiring at greater rates. If I'm an HR person, or if I'm an HR executive, or if I'm a CEO of an organization, and I start thinking about acquisition of new talent and the retention of my own talent, I always go back to that old quote about the CEO and CFO talking about why should we spend so much money to our people on training if they're going to leave? And the CEOs, well, what if we don't and they stay? I wonder, like, from your view, what are you seeing the best of the best doing as far as incorporating reskilling and upskilling, not only in an acquisition strategy, but also in a retention strategy for their best and their brightest?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces to that. And you kind of mentioned them, and Barnaby, you did as well, is there is, let's say, hard skills, soft skills. By the way, can we come up with different terms for that? I don't know what they are, but it seems like we should have two different words, and not like behavioral or professional. I don't know. So if anybody has an idea, please let me know.
Put it in the chat.
Yeah, put it in the chat, please do. Or I think we're in the Q&A panel today, so definitely do that. So when it comes to retention, it's very similar to what we talked about before. It is, yes, accessibility, and we do want to keep our employees. And we know from our own data and research that one of the things that most powers, I'm going to say, are a lever to engagement is, in my job, I'm challenged to grow. So in the work that I'm doing, not necessarily up, although that's awesome, right? To move up and get a cooler job title and more money. But I want to know that the organization is committed to me as an individual. Not just like my role and not just my job, not my job description, not just a piece of paper, if it's fine. But I want to know that the organization is committed to helping me as a unique individual continue to grow in my skills, in my career, in the opportunity I have to contribute more of the organization. And the learning, I don't think we quite sometimes given enough credit. And you're right, Doug, but it is such an important part of that, and the ability to give the employee some agency around where to go and accessibility to lots of different kinds of content. It helps them explore, to kind of go, oh, I never knew that this might be a thing, or here's something interesting that I'd like to learn more about. So that's super helpful for employees as well. So giving employees the space to be able to do that is so important. Remember back in the day, we said everybody should have 40 hours of learning. Remember that? And that kind of, we don't talk about that much anymore. But it doesn't have to be 40 hours. It doesn't have to be any set hours, but ensuring that us as leaders and organizations are giving our employees, our team members, the space to pursue learning new things and things that they're interested in the context of work is really important as an element to how do we continue to retain employees and let them know that we care about them as an individual.
I couldn't agree with you more. Doreen Coles suggested power skills. I think that would mean the opposite would be unpowered skills, but that doesn't sound nice. So I don't know. We're gonna have to work on that one, but I love that, Doreen. We can start with power skills. Barnaby, one of the things that I wrestle with a lot is somebody that leads an organization of delivery of people in delivery is that we have online courses that we can offer. We have virtual webinars. We're now back to a point in our world where we're doing in-person training as well, too. There's AI functionality that's out there that you can offset some of your training with as well, too. It seems to be like there's so much stuff out there. What do you think, Barnaby, equates to like a modern learning program? Is it a mix of all of those? And what does that look like?
Definitely. I think it's a healthy mix. And again, it sort of comes down to really addressing the needs of the individual. I think we're in the midst, I don't know if it's the beginning of the end or exactly where it is, but of a massive change in the way that people work. I think about here in the Seattle area where I am, Amazon is a huge employer, has a massive amount of office space, and they've basically gone to 100% hoteling. So people can go to any building they want to, and they're reconfiguring the space so that it's really all about collaboration. It's not about going to a cubicle or an office and sitting and doing your work. The assumption is that you can either do that at home, or you might want to move around and not always be in the same place. I think that's a physical manifestation of how work is changing. As it relates to learning and development, we need to have that same flexibility. We need to allow people to, and to your point also, boy, there's a lot coming at us all the time, right? Like our inboxes are always swollen, and there's Slack, and the opportunity to watch an infinite number of things on, online is absolutely there. And so I think it's a balancing act of giving people the freedom to do what it is that they want to do, the exploration. But then also, I do think it's important to come up with, I don't know if guardrails is quite the right term, but guides, threads and patterns that people can follow. And if you want to get better at your job, and potentially, to Amy's point, get that promotion, move to the next level, or make a lateral move, or as I was saying, because so many people are new in the role, just get proficient and comfortable in the role you're in now. Here are the things that we would strongly suggest you consider consuming, and that even that that content be presented in a variety of different ways. So be good for a company that has the resources and for employees who are comfortable to be able to come back to the classroom, because that is a way that some people really, really learn best. And then for those who, short form and frequent is better, here's kind of a stream, of many short things you can consume. And then for some people, they just love to set aside 8 hours and go super deep. Here's some content that does that as well. And so again, it's not a one size fits all, creating flexibility on the one hand, but then also guidance and structure on the other for people who are frankly flailing because of all the change.
It's interesting too, Barnaby, as somebody that puts together a lot of podcasts internally for ADP. One of the things that I try to think about is I try to go with the streaming mindset of nothing too long, but the ability to binge, right? So if I have a 7 or 8 podcast run, people could just choose to listen to one at a time, or they could just bang out all 8 in once. which is I'm really what I'm hoping for, right? It's like it's the Ozark mentality of I can't go to bed with got to see what's happening with these birds.
Right.
So, it's one of those things that we're always trying to keep mindful of is like, where do we want to meet the learner? And we got a great question in from Doreen Coles, who recommended power skills. And I'm still working, Doreen, I promise, on what the opposite of power skills would be for the soft skills. But a great question comes in, and it's something that Leah, myself, and a lot of people have thought about here internally at ADP is, where does experiential and exposure learning opportunities fit in? Right. Because we all kind of lean in so heavily on more formal education. And Doreen, we would love to see more L&D vendors figure out how to recommend and track the first two E's. So I wonder, Amy, you're working with people all the time. Like, where does experiential and exposure learning fit in?
Yeah, this is how I always kind of think about it and talk about it with my clients and with our clients, Doug, is, formal learning and training gets us to proficiency.
Yeah.
And that's so important. It's table stakes. Without that, like, you have to have that. And to Doreen's point, it's experiences and exposure helps get us to extraordinary. So those our own unique secret sauce, unlocking the best of each of us, no matter where you are in an org chart, comes from those experiences. And Doreen, I think you're absolutely right. Like, so how do we capture that? Part of the answer is we don't. Part of that because it's a very local and very unique thing. And a lot of that does lie on the shoulders of our team leaders and our managers and people leaders in the organization and us as talent practitioners as well. So it's our job to open up that space, to create those conversations and explore that world together, which is not always the easiest thing to do. And maybe there is a way, I mean, we talk about it all the time in our world, right? In the ADP world and in our client world, of helping employees as well as their team leaders understand where their own unique best work is and help them put those, we call them strengths, on the table more often. So I think when we look at it holistically, it's a combination of the two things. So without either piece of that, we're never going to unlock the full potential of our employees.
Barnaby, what about you?
Yeah, I think I started my online career in e-commerce, and I remember kind of thinking about how do we be as good as bricks and mortar back in the late 90s? And then, eventually we figured out many ways to basically leapfrog and be able to help people find and discover and buy things that they need or want. I think we're still in that phase of figuring out how to leapfrog the in-person experience, but I see promising signs of it. We recently partnered with Pluralsight, which is a online learning solution, mostly for technical skills, programming, data analytics, data analysis, and it's very experiential. Like, it takes you through kind of a journey, but it gives you real problems to work through, or the ability to write some real code and see whether it actually works or not. So I think there is emergent experience. There are emergent experiences that are both experiential and then exposure, because experience of actually doing it and the exposure of did it work or not. And then I think there are other things that we'll find the ability to incorporate more collaborative group learning, online coaching has become a really big thing. And I think that's another kind of exposure where you get somebody who's done it and they can share their experience or their path. Both coaching and mentoring are a couple of other areas that I think are really interesting and exciting that get at those two E's.
So before I do want to definitely get down to our last bullet, which is like the role, what's learning's role in productivity engagement and how HR and C-levels can really dive into it. But Amy, something that's been really buzzing in my head for the last 10 minutes, right? We're talking a lot about technology and a lot about skills-based stuff. And one of the things that I think you and I have actually talked about is when companies and organizations and on a divisional level, organizational level, roll out too much at once, there could be a little bit of recoil from the receiver, the learner itself. Like, how do people find that balance of not subjecting their learners, their employees, to the burnout of too much and excess?
Yeah, it's right touch, light touch.
Okay.
And being able to, again, give people some agency and ownership of kind of what they do and when. The exception to that is probably compliance training, which is so important. We need to elevate the importance of that. People kind of have this sense of, oh, I have to do compliance training. And it's so important to us as individuals as being, again, stewards of the organization, as well as organizationally from a risk perspective. So I just want to give a big shout out to compliance training because it's so important. One thing we also didn't talk about, Doug, is, and I think it relates to the question that you just asked, is there's no organization and no leader that says learning's not important, growth is not important. We all say that. But it kind of like proof is in the pudding, if you will. So think about when you go to your intranet site or whatever that is where your employees go to find learning content, to find development opportunities. And how much do they have to hunt to find your information on your organization's internal homepage? Like, is it off on the side and one little bullet point, or is it front and center? That says a lot to your employees about how important you think this is. So maybe one of the takeaways for folks out there today is make it front and center, make it an organizational priority. Don't just talk about it, but make it happen by giving employees even easier access to know where to go find things, where to take a class, where to do e-learning, how to find a coach, internal coach perhaps, being able to explore other careers in the organization. If it's really this important, then we kind of need to put it front and center and give it more real estate.
I love it because it seems like the central theme today is meeting the learners where they want to be met. And Barnaby, I see you shaking your head a lot. Do you have anything you want to add to that as far as like, how do we avoid that burnout? That, because I'll be honest with you, like I just had to go through a bunch of annual compliance training. And for me, Amy, it was a matter of, let's take a little bit at a time. And I wasn't binging that. But I wonder, Barnaby, like if you have a strategy in your mind about how to avoid that burnout as well.
Yeah, I think we see in the data, because we have millions of learners, the seasonality that happens largely with compliance, where people are kind of sort of forced to complete something by a certain date, and we're, everybody's, somewhat of a procrastinator, right? Like, and so we see these huge spikes that are clearly because of deadlines, and often it's a lot. To your point, people have to complete a lot. We see a lot of minutes or hours going in. So I would suggest just thinking about how can you spread it out. And I also double shout out to the compliance piece, right? That's it. These are often, it's safety. It's things that are sort of existential threats to an organization if people are not really up to speed on them. And I think that there are ways to make it more interesting, more fun. I think that's an opportunity as an industry that we can continue to increase the sort of interestingness, if you will, of all content, including the compliance-based stuff. But it's important that we all keep in mind that there's so many, all of our employees are being recruited all the time. And so if compliance isn't perceived as something that is a value add to the individual, they can vote with their feet and they can walk. And so we don't want to be pushing people out. And then on the other side, I would say that, again, learning and development was seen as a perk, as an extra. Now it's really a basic, and it's table stakes for many, many employees. And without it, and without a good experience there, they'll again consider moving on to another organization that's knocking on their door. Or I think I heard a doorbell. The recruiter just came to Amy's house looking to see if she would change jobs.
It's either that or you're good friends at Amazon from out where you are, Barnaby. Amy, before we go into the last bit of Q&A, I just wanted to bring back to one more question, Amy. So if I'm an HR person, I'm sitting on this. For me, there's been 100 things that I can't thank you both enough, and Michelle. I learned so much when I'm with you guys. If I'm an HR leader right now and I'm on this call, like what's a big takeaway I should be taking away from this call and what I can apply today?
I've probably got a list of like 10 things, but I think one thing, put learning front and center. Like I was just talking about, if it's important, make it show up that way. I think giving people options, right? Accessible, consumable, relevant, give them options to create their own paths. Yes, there are some things you need to do, but if we're going to help really differentiate our organization, that comes from our talent. It's sure technology, sure process effectiveness, that's fine, innovative products, but those things are moving so fast. Our sustainable differentiation comes from our employees. So it's worth it for us as leaders in organizations to invest in that. And so much of that comes from learning and development, and whether it be formal, informal, to Doreen's point, whether it be experiences, exposure, we have to make it a priority. If you want your organization to do more than just sustain, we want it to grow and grow quickly. So we've got to be able to double down in what employees are craving, quite frankly. And then I would say kind of the last thing is, I've been talking about this a lot, is everybody's been talking about generation stuff and Gen Z's coming into the workforce. Look, Gen Z wants what everyone else wants. They want the same thing, right? We all want the same thing. We want that. We do want a sense of purpose. We do want a sense of contribution. And as even more than that, we want to know that our work is appreciated. So I just would say, look, pay attention. As leaders, pay attention to what you're hearing in the organization, what employees are telling you, but first and foremost, create a culture of attention between team leaders and team members. Team leaders will then be able to get a better sense of what their team members need. I'll know them better. I'll know the work that they love. I know what they're working on, what they need from me. That culture of attention, that is a kind of like the core, is so important for everything that we do in the world of talent, including learning.
Listen, learning front and center is music to my ears. And Kathy put it in the chat as well, too. Music to her ears as well, too. Barnaby, you got the last word on this. What's a takeaway that you would want our people that are listening in to take away today?
Yeah, there's three things that come to mind. The first is, I think there's a real opportunity to connect learning in the business environment to strategy. So start with your company strategy and really think about how can I connect the things, the where the company wants to get to, with learning as a lever and as an engine to enabling that. Because at the end of the day, we all, and more and more so, it's people, right? Especially in the US economy, it's not machines, it's not how many factories you have, it's your people. And so enabling them to support that strategy and really think about that connectivity, I think is a real opportunity. The second, in building on that, and also building on the front and center and the things that Amy said, is experimentation. We don't have to spend a year or years putting together a curriculum and hiring instructors and training the trainer and all of that. There's a lot out there, as we talked about, too much for a lot of people. But if we focus and we say, like, maybe find some individuals within the company who are really interested in learning and development in a certain specific category, whether it be a power skill or a technical skill. I think I'm going to adopt those, and have them pilot going through some of that training and giving you feedback on whether it works and what works. And then building on that, the third I would say is really being data driven and using analytics and data around outcomes. So a bunch of people did this training, and did retention go up or down? Did productivity, however you measure that, go up or down? But really, again, connecting to starting with strategy, doing experimentation, and then finishing out with measuring what you did, and did it have the impact that you thought it would on the strategy, but also the tactics of making that a reality.
And I absolutely agree with you, Barnaby. Like, people at the forefront is always going to be the answer, and upskilling those people and making sure that you're meeting them where they want to be met, crafting a journey that they're helping co-craft that journey. I think all of those things are really important and incredibly great takeaways for this session. Amy, Barnaby, thank you so very, very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And we look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Thanks,
hey, Leah,
Doug.
You bet.
Thank you, Doug.
Hey, Leah, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do another poll, because that's what happens when we do these calls, Leah. We do a poll at the beginning and then we do a poll at the end. So here's what I would like to ask all my friends out there. If you want to know more about our ADP Workforce Now Essential Learning Program, please just let us know. Yes, no, or I already have the solution. If you already have the solution, you should just write to me and let me know how it's going for you. Maybe you could be a guest on our next webinar. We'd love to have you and hear from you. I think this has been a really fun session. Leah, what was your biggest takeaway from the session today?
I learned a ton and I took a lot of really great notes, and I appreciate like everything that was shared, and a lot of fun collaboration even coming through on the Q&A. Like Kathy James came on and said, learning front and center. I love that. And we high five you and totally agree with you, Kathy. So we'll wrap it up. But hey, like if anybody's interested in just learning more around how we can help you out, please, collaborate on the poll, reach out to us, let us know. We're happy to put you in touch with your local contact. And I second Doug. Thank you, Barnaby. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Doug. And thank you, listeners, for joining us today.
So here's what we're going to do. Amy, I actually just got a quick question that came in that I definitely want to fire off to you, Amy. So Gina Smith asks, in terms of upskilling employees to fill hard to fill positions, do you think it should be handled the same way that external recruiting is handled?
Oh, I kind of want to ask Gina more, like what she, I kind of want to ask her more around that. So I think upskilling, it's always, I don't want to say it's easier, but I think we should invest in our current employees first.
Okay.
And that may mean taking a couple chances, by the way. You may have someone who is in finance, and this is a true story, by the way, of one of our clients, had somebody who was in finance her entire career, said, I really, I love the leadership stuff. I love helping employees. And one of our clients gave that person a chance to move to a completely different area. So I think we need to be really open in investing in our employees in ways that might not be, I'm going to say, typical or conventional. So give people the space to explore. And I would invest in our own employees first. Of course, we have to bring in external talent. And that's so important as we increase innovation. We want different points of view. We want more diversity. And let's make sure that we keep the people that we have by knowing how important they are in our own organizations today.
So awesome answer. And I agree with you that you might want to get a little bit more information. So Gina, please reach out to us directly. We can connect the two of you to get more information and get you those better, get you more answers. Before we let everybody go, there's a couple of events that are happening relatively soon and that I want to make you aware of. First, we are building on our commitment to providing a forum for discussing how the world of work is evolving. So ADP is hosting its second annual Women at Work Summit on May 6th. It's a complimentary virtual summit that happens on May 6th. You'll hear from HR and inclusion leaders, economists, strategists, and business owners on how to close the labor force gap. So that is coming up in May. And in April, there's two other events that are coming. The first one is optimizing your global payroll and HR. That's going to happen on April 5th. And then on April 26th, recruiting and retaining talent using your hidden data insights. And if you want to find links to these upcoming webinars in the resources section and look for more information at adp.com/events. And before I let everybody go, I want to say thank you to my very good friend, Leah Shiro, for being an incredible host. We'll thank our friends at hr.com and especially Rhonda. Thank you very much for all of your help. Our woman behind the scenes, Carolyn Colch, thank you very much. And to Amy and to Barnaby and Michelle, thank you for lending your incredible insight to this panel. My name is Doug Plord. I can't thank you all enough for being part of this, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, bye.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doug, Amy, Barnaby, and Leah. Excellent presentation, and Go One for sponsoring, and for the folks at ADP, just fantastic. To all of you who joined us, thank you so very much. Great questions, great engagement. This will be archived on hr.com shortly. We'll send an email when it's ready to view again or to invite your peers to view it. Also, I'm not as quick on the draw here. I'm going to put a link to the exit survey in the chat. However, even if you miss that, it's going to pop open in a new browser on your computer. So just take a moment to fill that out. Your feedback is very important to us and to all of the presenters as well. So I'll just put that right in there. And your HRCI credit will appear in your hr.com account within 2 business days. Just give us a bit of time and then check on that. And that's all. Again, thanks so much.